Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya yato anvayaditaratascha artheshu abhigyaswarat Tene Brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayah Tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatratra sargo mrisha Dhamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amritadrava sanyutam Pibada Bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. So we now enter the 14th chapter of the 6th Skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. We saw the glorious story of Vrtra, who was a demon but a devotee at heart and who expressed the most beautiful prayers, teachings of self-knowledge, and then died to attain the lotus feet of the Lord. So now we continue. Having heard this beautiful story, Parikshit asks a very important question. He says, how is it possible that such unflinching devotion to the Supreme Lord appeared in the heart of Vrtra? Vrtra is by nature a demon, as we saw. Demons are normally predominated by Rajas and Tamas, lot of passion and ignorance. They are not normally saintly, let alone surrendered devotees. So how come he had such devotion? Narayane Bhagavati Katamasi Dridamatihi, he asks. How did he have such great devotion in Narayana, the Supreme Being? Then he says, devotion to the Supreme Lord Mukunda, the bestower of liberation. Mukunda is another beautiful name for Krishna, one who gives mukti. He says, devotion to Mukunda does not develop even in the demigods, even in many rishis, even in those with pure intellect. It's not an ordinary thing to have total devotion to Mukunda. He says, Devanam Shuddhasattvanam Rishinam Cha Amala Atmanam Bhaktir Mukunda Charane Na Prayena Upajayate. He says, normally such total devotion does not flower in the hearts of even great beings, because he says there are many billions, literally uncountable number of living entities in this world, like dust particles there are, and out of that only a small percentage of people are even interested in practicing dharma, and out of that only a few are interested in liberation. Mumukshu is the word for it. Those who desire liberation, those who desire to realize the self, there are very few. And he says, out of that, even among those who realize the self, only the rare few are situated in total devotion to the Supreme Lord Narayana. He says, Muktanam api siddhanam Narayana parayanaha sudurlabaha prashantatma kotishu api mahamune. So, this is similar to a verse in Bhagavad Gita too, where Krishna says that among many, hardly a few are interested in even inquiring into truth, and out of that, very few realize it, and among those, hardly anyone knows who I am really in essence. So here also, similarly, Parikshit says, among the uncountable number of living entities, only a few even practice dharma, that is virtue, and among them, hardly a few get interested in liberation. So already that is so rare that one is seeking truth, liberation. And among them, those who realize the truth even, hardly anyone, he says, is devoted to the Supreme Lord. So here what's important to recognize is that even though there are many self-realized beings, among them only a few are in the mood of devotion. And because the mood of devotion and surrender is the great auspicious blessing to all beings, their realization acts as blessing and benediction to the whole society, to the whole of universe. Whereas those who are self-realized but not in the mood of devotion, their realization and their freedom from attachment to I and mine is indeed a great realization on its own, but it is not on the same level as those who are also in the mood of devotion and surrender. And therefore, Parikshit says, this is very rare. So, to have such devotion and surrender to the Supreme Lord is rare even among self realized beings. And how come this normally sinful demon, Vrtra, was so surrendered that even in the battlefield at the moment of death, he was so steadfast in his devotion to the Lord? This is a very great doubt, and you have to resolve this, he asks Shuka Brahmarshi. So, every question of Parikshit is always very beautiful and elicits more and more nectar from Shuka Brahmarshi. So, Shuka Brahmarshi then continues and says that, okay, now I will respond to you a story in connection to this. So, Shuka Brahmarshi starts narrating a story which will be connected to the question that Parikshit has asked. Shuka Brahmarshi says, I heard the story from my father Vedavyasa, as also from Narada. So, in the country called Shurasena, which is the present day Mathura, which is, of course, near Vrindavan, Mathura being the birthplace of Krishna. So, in this land, Shurasena, there was a king called Chitraketu. And this Chitraketu was a very prosperous king, and he was ruling with Mathura as capital, a huge tract of land, and he had a lot of prosperity in his kingdom. Everything was fertile and flourishing. He had many wives, he had everything, and yet he had one major problem. As one can guess, he had no children. So he was completely anxious because of this one reason. This king, who had everything that money can buy, and he had many wives, very beautiful wives, and a kingdom and flourishing prosperity, yet had no issue. And therefore, even though he had beauty, generosity, youth, his lineage was noble, he had great learning, he had great fortune, all these were there, and yet he was sadly the husband of barren ladies, as he thought. And therefore, all the riches, all the fair queens he had, all the sovereignty of earth did not provide any pleasure to him, any delight to him. He was very depressed and sad due to this issue that there is nobody to take over after him. And in this time, during this time, a great sage called Angira happened to visit the kingdom by chance. So he visits the palace of the king Chitraketu. And Chitraketu, as is the custom of all the kings of Vedic civilization, gives the highest respect to the sage Angira, welcomes him, offers him articles of worship, gives him a high seat, washes his feet, and gives him a comfortable seat. And then, after making sure he is fed well, and the guest, being a sage, especially Angira, is taken care, Chitraketu modestly sits before him on the ground, taking a lower position, and humbly sits in front of him. And Angira, being very pleased, the sage, makes inquiries of Chitraketu. He says, O king, is everything well with you and your kingdom? Are all the elements of the state, that is the main priest, the ministers, the territories, the people, the police, the army, all these are considered the main aspects of any kingdom? There are 7 listed, in fact, and it is said that these 7 are essential for any kingdom. So these 7, the priests, the ministers, the territories, the fortresses, the treasury, the police, and the army, are all these doing well? Are all of them functioning properly? A king can enjoy the wealth only when all of these are in order, and the king has to serve all of them, and they have to serve the king. This is how order is maintained. Are everybody, including your wives and subjects and ministers, obedient to your will? And you should know that they will be obedient to your will only when you are yourself self-regulated and disciplined, and therefore your will is regulated and dharmic. And therefore, is this all the case, that everyone is living according to your will and you are yourself self-regulated? So, making all these general inquiries, then Angira looks at his face and says, I do see that your face is not showing happiness. You seem to be discolored with anxiety. It looks like you have not attained something that you desire deeply. So please tell me what it is. So when he is asked like this, Chitraketu, the king, who is bent low with modesty, he speaks very gently to the sage. Chitraketu sage, O great sage, you are asking as if you do not know, but you know everything that is there because you are a great yogi. He says very humbly first that being a great yogi who is a master in austerities and who is established in samadhi, in enlightenment, you know everything that's inside and outside. And therefore, I'm sure you're aware of what's plaguing me. And yet, because you ask me, I will tell you the sovereignty of this kingdom, the power, the affluence, all of this, which are coveted by everyone, is not bringing me any delight because I do not have a son to carry forward this kingdom. And therefore, just as one who is hungry and who needs water does not rejoice in anything else except water, similarly, I am not able to rejoice in anything else since I do not have a son. So please bless me to get out of this dark abyss. Only you can do so, and I'm sure that's why you have come here. So, listening to this and implored by the king in this manner, the sage smiled and said, okay, so there is a deity called Twashta. You offer this oblation to Twashta, and then you offer the remainder to your wife. So here one has to remember that Twashta is the same deity that gave forth the demon Vrtra. So Vishwarupa was slaughtered by Indra, and to take revenge on him, Twashta, who was the father of Vishwarupa as well, brought forth from Yajna the demon Vrtra, and that is how Vrtra came forth. And Vrtra, we saw the glorious heart of Vrtra and how he left his body in total surrender. So, this Twashta is what is referred here. This is a connection to remember as the story unfolds. So, the sage Angira says, offering the oblation to Twashta, give the reminder to your queen. The primary queen is called Kritadyuti. She is the eldest and the foremost queen in all aspects, according to the King Chitraketu. So, the oblation, the reminder was given to this queen Kritadyuti. Now, the all knowing sage smiles to Chitraketu and says, O king, because you implored me, I have given you this. Know that you will now have a son who will be a source of great joy and great grief to you. So, this is always the nature of the material world, that if one is very attached to anything, any outcome, any object, anything of external source of pleasure, it also contains in it the seed of suffering. So that's what Angira says here, that you will get a son, he will be a source of great joy and great grief. Chitraketu doesn't pay any heed to what he said. He only cares for the joy because, as he said, he is hungry, or he is thirsty rather, for water, and all he needs is water. And he doesn't even recognize what the water is containing. Similarly, he is here not even recognizing the words of the sage, and he just takes this oblation, gives it to his queen Kritadyuti, and sure enough, she is pregnant now. And after long last in this kingdom with so many wives, finally a queen is pregnant, and the whole kingdom starts celebrating. And sure enough, the embryo in the womb is growing, just as the moon waxes during the bright fortnight. This baby is growing in the womb of the mother Kritadyuti, and then slowly and surely the time of delivery comes, and as Chitraketu hoped for, a son is born because he wants a successor for the kingdom. And so when the son is born, it causes supreme delight to the entire kingdom. The whole kingdom erupts in joy because, as we can imagine, the whole kingdom is being aware of the great grief of the king of not having a son. And now that the king is expecting a baby, everybody is expecting as well. And when the news spreads that the son is born, the whole kingdom erupts. There is celebration all through. There is all kinds of festivities arranged in the capital city, and the king is extremely delighted. He takes his bath, purifies himself, wears new ornaments, does all kinds of necessary rites like jata karma for the baby, gets the priests to offer all kinds of benedictions, blessings on the baby, and then he offers all kinds of jewels, gold and silver, to the priests, clothes and ornaments. He offers horses, elephants, cows to the various people attending the ceremony. And it is said, just as a rain cloud pours down showers, the generous King Chitraketu poured gifts on people. Everyone was given gifts. All the regular people were also given gifts, and everybody was in turn blessing the baby. And so there was so much happiness all through. So the first part of the sage's prophecy is come true, that it is a source of great joy. Now the baby is still young. He is hardly a year old, and already the king is so attached to the baby. He is always only looking after the baby, and he is constantly thinking only about the baby, because, as we can imagine, after waiting for many, many years through many queens, he got this one baby. So he also got very attached to this one queen, Kritadyuti, who gave him this baby. And the mother also, that is Kritadyuti, the queen, she also got tremendously attached. There was so much infatuation. That's the word used here. In fact, Bhagavatam says it is not love, it is infatuation. The king and the queen were both completely infatuated with this baby, completely attached. And also the king was so attached to this queen as well, because she gave him the baby. And as this happened, naturally, a lot of jealousy was born in the other wives. So he had many wives, we saw, and the other wives were now completely ignored by the king. So the king Chitraketu was only paying attention to this one queen and this baby, and all the other co-wives were all ignored, and they were not feeling any fondness. Far from it, they were only ignored, because he had only cared for this one queen who gave the son. So they were now reproaching themselves, because they were very angry in every way that only this one queen was getting all the attention. They felt that, it is worse for us to be here than being a maid servant. Even maid servants, they said, were getting more respect. We are worse than the maid servants of maid servants, because we are ignored by everyone. Even the maid servants are only going to serve this one queen. Nobody cares for us. So this is how we can imagine how the ego operates in everyone. On the one hand, in the king, because of his lack of balance, he was so infatuated with this one queen and with the baby. And these other queens, who were also caught in ego in the negative way, were feeling victimhood, and therefore they were completely burning with jealousy. They were feeling that we are worse than maid servants, and nobody respects us, and we were queens. We were all on the same level until this baby was born. And now, with this baby born, only she gets all the attention, and we are all completely ignored. And therefore, this bitter hatred grew in them day by day, and it became like a poison, and they were burning with jealousy. And because of this poison of deep malice in their heart, of this resentment, they literally decided to do something which is unthinkable. They decided to give poison to this baby, because they decided that this baby is the root of all their sufferings, and therefore we have to get rid of this baby. And so the poison in their heart came out as literally poison. And they, one day, when the baby was sleeping alone, the queen had just left the baby. They entered the inner quarter, a few of these queens, and they silently gave poison to this baby, and they left. And the queen came back to check, and the baby was sleeping, and she thought the baby is having a long sleep. And after a little while, the queen saw it was unusual that the baby is sleeping for so long. So she asked the nurse to go and check what's going on with the baby. Please go and check. So the nurse went inside, And she checked, and to her utter shock, she saw that the baby had the skin had grown pale, the pupils of its eyes had gone upwards, and it had lost its life. There was no life left in the baby. The baby had died. So now the nurse instantly fell to the ground, crying, I am finished. She says, Hatas me, because she is responsible for the baby. So she felt a deep sense of responsibility that the baby had died under her watch, and she cried and she started beating her own breasts as it is done by many. And she started crying violently, beating her breasts with her hands. And hearing this cry, the queen comes in, and the queen sees the scene. She sees that the nurse is crying, and then she sees that her infant son has died suddenly, and she cannot even withstand this scene. She faints immediately with her hair flung and her garments are flying. And this wail of the queen before she faints and the nurse crying, this is heard in the quarters, and everybody starts running, all the men and the women. They are all running towards the inner quarter. And even the meanwhile, these queens who had done this horror, the co-wives, they also come in and they pretend like they have tears too. They are shedding crocodile tears. And hearing all this, the news reaches the father, and the father, Chitraketu, as we already saw, he was so attached, and so he completely loses his mind. And not only that, literally, it is said that he goes blind. Somehow his vision is affected. He is not able to see anything just because of the grief. It blinds him literally. He is not able to see anymore, and he stumbles his way across. Somehow people help him, and he stumbles into the inner quarter where his dead child is there, and he falls down literally near the feet of this dead child. His hair is disheveled. He is crying. He cannot say anything, and then he simply falls down. And the wife wakes up to see her husband is crying and falling down. She is again crying, and she is unconsolable. And now she is addressing the Creator. She's crying out. She says, "Oh Creator, what have you done?" She says, "Aho Vidhata, oh Creator, why are you so cruel? Either you are so cruel or you are so foolish. How can you make a baby go before their own parents? We are supposed to be taken care by the son. We are not supposed to send him before us. What have you done? This is unthinkable." And then she addresses the child and says, "Oh child, where have you gone? You must be hungry. You are pretending. I hope you are still asleep. Wake up. Your mother is waiting. Please come and take milk from these breasts." She is not able to accept the fact that the baby has died. She is still crying to this baby, "Eat something, wake up, you must be hungry." And then she is reconciling that the baby is not getting up and says, "Have you gone away? Have you left me and gone?" She is full of inconsolable anguish and tears. So in this way, everyone there is mourning. So now, as we can see, the prophecy of the sage, second part, the son will be the source of great grief, that has also come true. So Chitraketu didn't hear that. He went for it. He got the joy. He got the grief. The whole kingdom is plunged into grief. Everybody is wailing. The whole kingdom, which had erupted in joy only maybe a year ago, now is completely sunk in depression and sadness. At this moment, when this is happening, when everybody seems to have lost their consciousness and given to despair, there appeared the sage Angira again, and he brought along with him Narada. And with this chapter ends. One thing we can see in Bhagavatam, as we have observed before, is every chapter ends on a positive note. This chapter is one of the saddest chapters of Bhagavatam, with such tragedy of losing a baby and the whole kingdom in despair. And yet Bhagavatam, Shuka Brahmarshi ends this chapter with the one line that says, Narada comes there. And Narada coming to this kingdom at this moment is the greatest sign of auspiciousness. And so, what Angira, the sage who prophesied about this baby, along with the great sage Narada, what will they now say? We will see in the next chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.